He wanted to buy an expensive suit as a New Year's gift, but when his wife saw the price she said, "Are you crazy? That's almost enough for 2 months of our family's living expenses." He still tried to argue since their daughter had just bought a rather pricey pair of shoes, but his wife told him to take the suit off immediately and promised they could buy a cake later as compensation. This time, however, he didn't want to compromise again. Jack had had enough of such a dull and tasteless life, where every day was nothing but going to work, coming home, taking care of the kids, and walking the dog, barely sleeping 6 hours each night before facing the same routine again. His wife Kate said she was sorry, admitting she hadn't realized he was so dissatisfied with their current life.
"I can't believe it isn't a disappointment to you."
Jack then began to complain, saying, "If it weren't for you making me give up my dreams, I could have had a brilliant future and might even have become the richest man in the world." His words left Kate bewildered, as the gentle and considerate husband she once knew seemed to have vanished. Angry, she snapped, "Fine, buy it if you want, but then go take the money out of our child's education fund." Enraged, Jack tore off the suit and settled for the piece of cake his wife had promised as compensation. On the drive home, the atmosphere in the car was unbearably heavy, each of them lost in their own thoughts. And the truth was, Jack wasn't actually Kate's husband at all, because 13 years ago, when they had just graduated college as first loves, they went their separate ways. Jack ignored Kate's pleas and insisted on going to London for an internship. In the blink of an eye, 13 years had passed, and Jack had become one of Wall Street's top financial managers. He lived in a luxurious penthouse overlooking the bustling city, wore only tailor-made expensive suits, drove limited-edition sports cars to and from work, and spent his nights with different beautiful women throwing themselves into his arms. That day, he was preparing the largest merger in history, involving more than $130 billion, planning to use the massive bonus as his own Christmas gift. His career was a dazzling success, yet on Christmas Eve, after working late into the night at the office, he looked out at the endless stream of traffic below and suddenly felt an emptiness and loneliness inside. Deciding not to drive his sports car, he chose to walk home instead. Snowflakes drifted down from the sky, and Jack unexpectedly wandered into a small shop, unaware that a man had followed behind him. The man excitedly held up his winning lottery ticket, hoping to claim the prize, but the clerk didn't even glance at it before saying there was a problem and accusing him of altering the numbers with a pencil, then bluntly told him to get out. Furious, the man pulled out a handgun he carried with him, and just as the situation was about to spiral out of control, Jack stepped forward. He offered to buy the ticket for $200, explaining he could later cash it in himself and keep the profit. Seeing Jack's sincerity, the man agreed, and after the transaction, Jack kindly advised him not to walk around the streets waving a gun, warning that it could lead to regret. Perhaps sensing Jack's goodwill, the man turned to him and asked if there was anything he needed. Jack, believing his wealth could already buy him everything he wanted, said he lacked nothing. To his surprise, the man replied with a puzzling remark.
"You just remember that you did this, Jack, okay?"
However, the man walked away without looking back, leaving Jack completely confused, though he didn't dwell on it. Returning to his luxurious penthouse, he collapsed onto his bed, only to wake up to a shocking scene. His first love from 13 years ago was lying on top of him. At first, he thought he was still dreaming, not fully awake, but then 2 children and a dog jumped onto the bed as well, with the kids calling him Dad. Already bewildered, Jack grew even more confused. In a panic, he hurriedly got dressed, rushed downstairs, jumped into the family car, and drove straight to New York. When he arrived at the base of his penthouse building, the security guard, who greeted him every day, suddenly stopped him. Even the neighbors he used to chat with every day no longer recognized him. The security guard warned him to leave immediately or he'd call the police, while a neighbor suggested that if Jack needed help, they could contact a shelter for him. Already baffled, Jack's confusion turned into fury, but the guards still refused to let him upstairs. Left with no choice, Jack decided to head to his company, only to be stopped by the building's security as well. He insisted he was the general manager there and told the guard to look at the sign with his name on it, but to his horror, the general manager was now one of his former subordinates. Terrified, Jack bolted out of the building, and the moment he hit the street, he was nearly run over by a car. Jack suddenly realized that the car was his own sports car, now being driven by the man from the night before. He demanded to know what was going on, and the man told him it was all his own doing, because he had said he lacked nothing. As a token of gratitude for Jack stepping in the previous night, they decided to give him an extraordinary experience. This was the life of his other self in a parallel world. How long the experience would last, the man said, depended entirely on Jack's own understanding. With that, he handed Jack a bicycle bell, and before Jack could figure out what was happening, the man hit the accelerator and sped away, leaving Jack standing there in utter confusion. With nowhere else to go, Jack decided to drive home, but unfamiliar with the roads, he couldn't find the way back. He stopped to ask for directions and unexpectedly ran into an old friend from town, who took him inside and showed him photos of the two of them on the wall. From his friend's description, Jack learned that Kate was his wife. They had 2 lovely children, and they lived in a cozy little house that everyone in town envied. Still bewildered, Jack decided to at least try to accept it for now. He cautiously stepped into what was supposed to be his home, and the moment he entered, Kate rushed over to give him a big hug. Wiping her nose, she scolded him, saying he had disappeared for hours without a word, leaving her worried sick. She had contacted all their friends and even called the police to look for him. Jack desperately wanted to make sense of it all. After all, he wasn't married and didn't live here, so in an attempt to prove he wasn't lying, he pulled out the bicycle bell the man had given him. The man didn't appear, yet the daughter came over.
I like it. Thanks, Dad.
That's mine. Hey, I need that back.
Kate didn't want to argue anymore and just urged him to change clothes quickly, as the party at their friend's house was about to start. When Jack opened the wardrobe, he frowned. Everything inside was cheap, cotton, street market quality. Even their daughter was so startled she turned and ran. Throughout the party, Jack felt completely out of place. A brightly dressed woman approached and greeted him, and it was there that he learned Kate worked as a pro bono public interest lawyer. Finally, when the party ended and they returned home late at night, Kate insisted Jack take the dog out for a walk. With no choice, he had to grab the leash and go. When he returned from walking the dog, Kate was already asleep. Looking at the cheap pajamas she had laid out for him, a sleepy Jack could only sigh in resignation. The next morning, he reached for the bed and found no one there, momentarily believing he was back in his old life, and he smiled with relief. But the sound of the children crying quickly pulled him back to reality. Unsure what to do, Jack went to find his wife, only to discover her in the bathroom dancing wildly to music. Kate told him that today it was his turn to take care of the kids. Having never cared for children before, Jack was completely flustered. Even changing a single diaper became a huge challenge. Luckily, with guidance from his daughter, he clumsily managed to get it done. Seeing how clumsy he was, his daughter asked, "You're not my dad, are you?" Faced with the question, Jack had no choice but to admit honestly, "No, I'm not your dad. I'm just here to experience this, but your real dad will be back soon." His daughter touched his face and pinched his nose, saying, "Wow, the alien impersonation is pretty realistic. I hope you don't abduct me or my brother." Jack promised her he wouldn't. Then she said, "Welcome to Earth." Following her guidance, Jack first took his son to daycare, then dropped his daughter off at school, and finally arrived at the place she said was where he worked. It turned out that in this small town, he had inherited his father-in-law's tire shop. Jack had initially thought that at least he was the owner, but seeing the ledger filled with red ink, he immediately felt troubled. Facing this kind of life, he couldn't understand why the Jack in the photos was smiling so happily. Certificates on the wall showed that in 1988, he had been the top salesperson at the tire shop. Apparently, in this world, Jack hadn't gone to London 13 years ago. That night, lying in bed and watching TV, he saw news coverage of the billion-dollar merger, a deal that should have been his achievement, but instead had become the success of his subordinate. Just as Jack felt helpless, Kate burst in excitedly. The children had gone to bed early that day, and she planned to finally enjoy some alone time with him. At that moment, Jack noticed that Kate was still as beautiful as she had been in college, now even more mature and sexy. Hearing this, Kate decided to surprise him, quickly transforming herself back to her college appearance. But when she returned to the bedroom, Jack was already asleep. She didn't disturb him further. Instead, she gently tucked him in, planted a soft kiss on his cheek, and then lay down beside him to sleep. In fact, Jack hadn't fallen asleep. Seeing his wife who loved him so deeply, he felt the same love he had experienced in his first romance. For the first time, the thought of not wanting to return to his old life surfaced. The next day, when they went shopping together, the scene from the beginning unfolded. Jack wanted to buy an expensive suit, and Kate firmly disagreed after seeing the price, leading to their first intense argument. In the end, Jack accepted Kate's offer of a cake as compensation. On the way home, he was the first to apologize, admitting that he couldn't understand why the Jack in this world seemed so unaccomplished. He then learned that it was because they had unexpectedly had a daughter, and for the sake of the child, they had moved from New York to this town. It was precisely because of Jack that his father-in-law's tire shop hadn't gone under. Kate felt fulfilled simply by having the family together. Feeling down, Jack went to the bowling alley, only to run into the same boldly flirtatious woman from the party. Reflecting on her behavior the last time, Jack subtly asked her, "Is there something between us?" Hearing this, she chose to be completely honest. The sexy dress she wore at the party had been specifically for him. She had no real need for the tires he bought, and their children being in the same dance class was all a way to get closer to him. Jack suddenly realized the truth. His counterpart in this world possessed such undeniable charm. The woman boldly invited him to her house over the weekend, saying she'd be home alone that day. Jack, thrilled, hurried to his friend to get her address, only to be scolded. His friend couldn't believe Jack would even think such a thing. Kate was the kind of woman who made every man in town envious, and here he was failing to appreciate her properly. After saying this, his friend angrily stormed off. Hearing those words, Jack suddenly realized that the situation was far more complicated than he had imagined. When he returned home, Jack noticed that the cake he had deliberately set aside was gone. Turning around, he saw it in front of Kate, who deliberately took a bite right in front of him. Jack tried to get her to hand over the cake, but Kate firmly refused. The two of them then chased each other around the room over that single piece of cake, eventually collapsing onto the stairs. They smeared the cake into each other's mouths, and that small cake gave Jack a profound sense of the joy of being with the one he loved. That day, he noticed a CD on the bookshelf titled Jack Singing, and on a whim, he popped it into the player and hit play. That day was Kate's 22nd birthday, and Jack sang for her. As he watched, tears welled up in his eyes. He realized how deeply they loved each other in this world. Such genuine love was something he had never experienced in his bustling former life. Even a single glance was enough to make him yearn for it. Jack once again felt that life in this world might not be so bad after all. The next morning, their sleep was interrupted by the alarm clock, as it was Jack's turn to take care of the children. While he stepped out of the room to prepare milk for them, Kate quickly got out of bed. When he returned, still half asleep, he found her excitedly holding a package. She couldn't wait for Jack to open the gift. It was a high-quality replica of the designer's suit he had admired that day. Though she couldn't afford the real thing, the fake looked just as sharp on him. It turned out she had never forgotten what Jack had wanted. Then, excitedly, she opened her arms, eagerly waiting for Jack's gift. Today was their wedding anniversary. Of course, Jack had no idea and hadn't prepared anything. Seeing his wife's disappointed expression, Jack felt his heart sink. Realizing the significance, he resolved to make it up to Kate no matter what. Upon learning that this version of Jack had never taken Kate into town for a proper outing, he decided to take her in and show her a truly fun day. That evening, he took Kate to a high-end restaurant in New York. The idea was excellent, though she worried about the cost. Kate couldn't hide her excitement. Jack skillfully ordered several signature dishes along with a bottle of expensive wine, but Kate immediately stopped him, pointing out that $800 a bottle was simply too much. Jack settled for 2 glasses of regular wine instead, which made Kate happy, though she still hadn't fully forgiven him. He then stood and invited her to dance. In the restaurant, which had no dance floor, their romantic movements drew the admiration of everyone around. They moved with elegance and ease, completely immersed in each other, like the brightest star in the night sky. After a dance, they ate and chatted together. Jack finally voiced a long-held confusion. He no longer envied his former life, yet he couldn't say what was good or bad about this one. Kate shared her own thoughts, admitting that she had wondered what life would have been like if she hadn't married him, but doing so would have erased the most important things. After dinner, they went to the hotel, entwined in each other with overflowing affection, and Jack realized how much he had once missed. From then on, he began to slowly enjoy his current life. The off-key notes of his daughter's violin now sounded beautiful. He no longer complained about the cheap fabrics in the wardrobe, and he left the house each day with a loving farewell kiss from his wife. All of this filled him with confidence as he went to sell tires at the shop. Although the thought of returning to his old life had vanished, Jack still wanted to give his wife and children a better life. That day, an opportunity finally arrived. He saw a car from the other world pull in for a tire change due to a flat. Jack boldly approached and struck up a conversation, directly pointing out that the $120 billion merger could have reached at least $130 billion under his management, and he candidly highlighted the company's current flaws and risks. Before leaving, the boss handed him a business card and asked him to personally deliver the car. A few days later, Jack drove the car downstairs and handed over the keys to reception, feeling the familiar thrill return. This was a golden chance for him to reclaim his peak. During the interview, Jack was extremely confident. His understanding of the people from the other world made him appear self-assured and composed. He even stated that, if accepted into the company, he was willing to start from the very bottom. Such talent combined with humility greatly impressed the boss, who immediately offered him a luxury apartment as a company benefit. That evening, Jack took Kate to tour the new apartment, hoping the whole family could move in and that the children would receive a better education there. However, instead of feeling the joy he expected, Kate criticized him for acting on his own and moving the family away from their cozy home without consulting her. "We moved to the countryside for the children in the first place. How can we just move back now?" Hearing this, Jack decided to compromise. "Fine, we don't have to live here. I can just drive to work every day." Yet Kate still refused. Commuting here would take at least 3 hours each way, and then you'd have even less time with the family. Confused, Jack asked her, "Why don't you want a life that everyone would envy?" But Kate replied,
"They already do envy us."
His wife's response made Jack pause and reflect. Once again, he faced the same choice he had 13 years ago. As he considered how to balance the competing interests, he noticed a ticket stub, an airplane ticket from London to New York. It turned out that in this world, he had flown back the very next day. At that moment, Kate approached him and said, "The day you returned surprised me more than anything. It was the best gift I've ever received. I've seriously considered your decision. I admit I love life in the countryside, and even my life plans are rooted there, but if you truly want to pursue your career, I'm willing to give up everything and bring the children with me to support you." His wife's words stirred a whirlwind of emotions within Jack. At last, he realized that true life wasn't about how many envied him, but about the happiness of being together with his family. The next morning, Kate woke to find Jack playing with the children in the yard. In the end, he had chosen to stay by his family's side. Seeing this heartwarming scene, Kate finally wore a relieved smile. That evening, he noticed the de-icing salt in the warehouse was running low. Just then, the sound of a bicycle bell rang from behind. He turned and was relieved to see it was only his daughter, but still, Jack couldn't shake a lingering sense of unease. When he went to the grocery store to buy salt, he saw the familiar man again at the checkout. The man told him it was time to go back. But this time, Jack had no intention of leaving. The man, serious, warned him that the experience was only temporary. Jack ignored him and quickly left, determined to return to his wife and children. Though filled with a sense of helplessness, he knew that one day he would have to leave. Tenderly, he stroked his sleeping son, kissed his adorable daughter, his eyes brimming with both reluctance and love.
Take care, Annie. I'm going back to the mothership.
He then went to his gentle wife, hoping Kate would remember him just as he was now, no matter what, and never forget. Although puzzled, Kate agreed. Afterwards, he went outside to walk the dog again, and snow began to fall just like that Christmas Eve night. Jack knew that what had to come would come. Back home, he sat on the bedroom sofa, watching Kate asleep in bed, determined to stay awake all night. He didn't want to leave this world. But as sleep overtook him, he could no longer resist and eventually fell asleep on the sofa. When he woke up again, he was back in an empty room, once more completely alone, no children's laughter, no warmth from his wife, only solitude. He drove all the way to the cozy countryside home, hoping to reclaim what once was. The walls and bricks felt familiar, yet the door was opened by a stranger, and the Kate he knew no longer lived there. On his way back, he suddenly received a call from the company. The $120 billion merger had hit a problem. Jack proposed a solution and planned to fly out to meet the business owner in person. But at that moment, he was utterly exhausted, both physically and mentally. The energetic man he once was had vanished. Through connections, he finally tracked down Kate's current address. When he arrived upstairs, he happened to meet Kate in the midst of moving. In this world, she was equally successful, unmarried, and running her own law firm, preparing to relocate to Paris. Jack wanted to invite her for a cup of coffee.
Do you ever think about us, Kate? About what might have happened?
The suddenness of Jack's request left Kate unsure how to respond, and she politely declined the coffee invitation. "Maybe when you have a chance to come to Paris," she said, then handed him a box filled with old belongings. Jack didn't press further. Sometimes the best choice is simply to let go. On the way to negotiate the merger, Jack had the driver turn the car around and returned home. Opening the box, he found everything from 13 years ago. At that moment, he resolved to give it his all. No matter the outcome, he would fight for himself this time. Jumping into his sports car, he sped toward the airport. This time, he refused to miss it. He dashed through the terminal and finally saw Kate preparing for security. He called out loudly, and hearing his voice, Kate slowly walked toward him. But she thought Jack was acting on a whim. After all, their story had ended 13 years ago. After offering him a few comforting words, Kate prepared to return to her group. Watching the person he loved slowly drift away, Jack felt disheartened. Could he really let everything end just like that? Summoning his courage, he recounted the story of their lives in the parallel world. Perhaps it was the absurd, impossible tales he told that reminded Kate of the little moments from 13 years ago, or perhaps those stories reflected what she had once longed for. Maybe she was deeply moved by Jack's words, or by the echoes of another world, or maybe her long singlehood was tied to past love. In the end, she didn't board the plane to Paris. That snowy night, they began anew together once more. The Family Man, directed by Brett Ratner and starring Nicolas Cage and Tia Leone, is a 2000 fantasy family film. It explores the idea that everyone's life could have multiple versions, presenting a theme that directly touches on life's true essence. However, it isn't strictly a movie about making choices, like choosing between love and career. Rather, it's a story about experiencing different possibilities and seeing how life might unfold under alternate circumstances.